The Honorable, the Speaker.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I start my winding up of this budget debate, let me first congratulate all 23 members of the People's National Movement who spoke in this debate for their sterling contribution. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, before I get into some more weighty matters, let me just deal with some trivia raised by honorable members opposite, not in any particular order. Just today, Madam Speaker, I heard the member for Shogunas West allege inaccurately that I had said, or we had said, that we would not be introducing a tax on online shopping. Madam Speaker, I will read now from my statement in the mid-year budget review, and I quote, "We intend to introduce, Madam Speaker, a levy of 7% on online purchases of goods and services through the internet from retail companies resident overseas that are not subject to taxation in Trinidad and Tobago. It is a well-established precedent for a tax of this nature in countries such as the USA, UK, and New Zealand. Online purchases are now a significant area of foreign exchange demand." So in April of this year, Madam Speaker, I stated in unequivocal language that the government intended to impose a 7% tax on online shopping. But the member for Shogunas West could peddle this mischief, and other commentators are surprised about this as if it came like a bolt from the sky. So that deals with that. Yes, Madam Speaker. Let me also deal with an allegation, again a false allegation, made by the member for Caroni Central, among the many such allegations that he made, when the member for Caroni Central, in attempting to undermine the Sandals resort project that we are promoting to give a lift and a boost, a quantum leap to tourism in Tobago and in Trinidad, Madam Speaker, when he made the false allegation that Sandals does not even buy a single orange from the countries in the Caribbean in which he says not even a single orange. And I read, Madam Speaker, from the Jamaica Observer, Friday the 24th of January 2014, business, Sandals seeks deeper agro linkages locally. The 2014, the Sandals Group, which spends over $5.3 billion on local purchases, remains keen on the prospects of new tourism linkages to grow its local agriculture purchases for the regional hotel chain. 10% of that amount of $5.3 billion represents farmers' produce, said Keith Collister of the Sandals Group at the 9th annual GSE Investments Conference at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel in Kingston. And it goes on to give copious information on the purchases by the Sandals Group from local suppliers of goods and services in Jamaica. $5.3 billion. But according to the member for Caroni Central, in his usual politically reckless manner, not an orange do they buy from the local sector. Shameful. Shameful. That's what they said. There's a level of political illiteracy here, Madam Speaker. 5.3 billion in local purchases from the local private sector in Jamaica per year. Now, Madam Speaker, let me move now, and I'll come to this in a little while, but I want to refresh the memories of members opposite, because honourable members opposite come into this parliament and say the most ridiculous things. And I was going through the allegations made by the leader of the opposition in the response to the budget, and Madam Speaker, there were 3 items that I found quite bizarre. The first item was her inability, the honourable member's inability, to understand the estimates of expenditure. Shocking for someone
How many years?
who has been in this parliament for 20 years?
20.
I think it's 20 years.
Twice a leader of opposition
And
a PM.
a leader of an opposition, a prime minister for 5 years, can't understand the estimates of expenditure. But we'll deal with that in a little while. Let me deal with this allegation about the public offerings, the divestment of First Citizens Bank and Trinidad and Tobago NGL and the other companies that I referred to in the budget speech that have been earmarked as potential companies for divestment. And in the honourable member's presentation, the honourable member had the audacity to speak about the planned divestment of up to 20% of FCB in this way. Many of the same shareholders are also involved in First Citizens. I am certain there would be issues of concern there as well. So it is interlocking with First Citizens. It is interlocking with NGC. It is disgraceful. And then quote from Sir Walter Scott about the tangled web we weave. Let me refresh the memories of the honourable members opposite. I now refer to the Express, May the 20th, 2014. The headline is the Philip Rahman IPO scandal. And who was in power in 2014? The People's Partnership Government. And let's see what the Express had to say about that. On March 24th, First Citizens announced it had fired its former Chief Risk Officer, Philip Rahman. The bank said he was dismissed because it had lost confidence in his ability to carry out his duties. His dismissal came on the heels of the publications of the bank's annual report, which showed he owned 659,588 shares in the state enterprise. He sold 634,588 of his shares on January 14, which would have netted a profit of over $12 million, inclusive of $718,950 in dividends. The transaction was brokered by Boss Securities. The shares were sold to his cousin, Imtiaz, his aunt Alia, and 5 companies owned by the Rahman family. The sale never triggered an alert in the stock exchange because he was registered as a bank employee, Philip Rahman, but he conducted the transaction under his full name, Hassan Philip Rahman. Another casualty of the scandal has been former independent senator, former chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, current managing director of Boss Securities, Subhas Ram Kilawan. Now, Madam Speaker, all of us who live in this country know what happened with that IPO. The scandal of that IPO. Officers of the bank, directors of the bank, appointed by them, honourable members opposite, profiting under their Minister of Finance, profiting improperly in millions of dollars of improper profits from that FCB IPO, utilizing loopholes in the prospectus to make millions of dollars off of taxpayers. And yet, the honourable leader of the opposition would have the brass face to come in this house and talk about the potential divestment of FCB by this government and try to make us believe, fool us into believing that FCB IPO corruption never happened. That is how they operate. Skip past it, just close their eye and hope everybody forget that there was no corruption, that the whole board, that the government had to fire the entire board of FCB, fire the chairman, get rid of all of them. And the matter is now with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I'm advised it is soon will be with the Director of Public Prosecutions. But I had to hear this nonsense about this government. And Madam Speaker, I am worried about who is writing the speeches for the Leader of the Opposition. Because that person is illiterate. Whoever it is writes her speeches, that person is illiterate. Illiterate. And also suffering from some kind of intellectual incapacity. Because when you go into the speech, I spoke about public offerings. I said that as part of the divestment, we will make arrangements for existing shareholders, Madam Speaker. There's no part in my speech where I say that only existing shareholders will benefit from the divestment.
Conspiracy theory.
And spent an hour, as I said, inventing a conspiracy, an imaginary conspiracy that doesn't exist, putting up what they call in literature a straw man and beat down the straw man. A figment of the opposition leader's imagination. There is nothing in here that indicates that only existing shareholders of these companies would receive the shares that are to be divested. And you notice the humor of the whole thing? The honourable member started off with NGL, where the Answer Makal Group and its associated companies currently owns 2.56%. But of course, her speechwriter said they own 5.6%. Just making up stories. 2.56%. And as one of the categories, like in any divestment, you'll divest to employees, you'll divest to individuals, you'll invest to institutional investors, you'll reserve some for credit unions, you'll reserve some for the National Insurance Board, pension funds, unit trust. So you're going to have an entire series of categories of persons who will get a percentage. So individuals may get 30%, 40%. We haven't worked out the details yet. And unlike them, as you will see from these documents, the review of the economy and so on, we don't hide anything on this side. We don't do anything in secret on this side. So unlike them, the public will be aware of how we are going to divest that 20% from FCB and that whatever it is we shall divest from NGL long before the matter is finalized, Madam Speaker. And we allow people to comment on it. What do you think of this? Do you think we should give 30% to individuals or 40%? Should we give 10% to companies or 5%? Should we give 20% to credit unions or 15%? That is how we operate on this side, Madam Speaker. Complete and open transparency. But the speechwriter concocts this fantastic story and puts into the speech a falsehood about Mr. Jerry Brooks. I don't know what they have with Jerry Brooks. What is the problem? As the Prime Minister said, it is not easy to get distinguished sons of Trinidad and Tobago, honest people, unlike some others in the recent past that I will not speak about. It is not easy to get distinguished professionals to take up appointments in the state sector. It is not easy. And when you have a distinguished man like Jerry Brooks with an unblemished record in the private sector, and you want to come and keep trying to nasty his name, and then you tell falsehoods about him. In the speech, what does the Honourable Leader of the Opposition say? What does the Honourable Leader say? She said, and I have the Honourable Member's Hansard, and I heard some muttering down from that side, because it had already been exposed that it is not true. Hear what the Honourable Leader said. I'm reading her words. Soon after the elections last year, Mr. Jerry Brooks retired as Chief Operations Officer of one of the largest conglomerates in Trinidad and Tobago.
After the election.
After the election, it is alleged. At the time of his retirement, Mr. Brooks was a member of the board of the parent company of the said conglomerate. So according to the Leader of the Opposition, after September 7th last year, and after the ascension to office of this PNM administration, Mr. Jerry Brooks, at some point in time after that, retired as Chief Operations Officer of one of the largest conglomerates in Trinidad, and he was a member of the board at that time of the parent company of that said conglomerate. Then goes on again to build up a straw man. Listen to this. Thanks to this government, Mr. Jerry Brooks, within days, went from being an associate with 5 entities holding shares in TTNGL to being chairman of the largest shareholder, the NGC. So from being associated with the 5 entities holding the shares, he now becomes the boss, the chairman of 2. And then goes on to say, instead of controlling 5.6%, when it's really 2%, of this lucrative corporate asset, Mr. Brooks and his associates now control 57.6%. I just can't use the words that I would want to use because I would be deemed to be unparliamentary. All I can say is that is a complete fabrication. And the Honourable Member for Superior should be ashamed of herself. I will now read into the record the letter written by the Group Head of Legal Corporate Secretary of Ansa Makal, April 1st, 2015. April 1st, 2015.
5 months before.
5 months before the general election. To Mr. C. Wainwright Iton, Chief Executive Officer, Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission. Report of material change, Ansa Makal Limited. Further to our letter to you dated March 31st, 2015. In accordance with Section 64(1) of the Securities Act, we wish to advise that the retirement of Mr. Jerry Brooks from the positions of Group Chief Operating Officer, Manufacturing Sector Head of Ansa Makal, as well as Director on the board of the company, will take effect from April 30th, 2015.
Before the election.
Please see enclosed a copy of the notice which will be published in 2 of the leading newspapers on April 2nd, 2015.
SEC regs.
So on April 2nd, 2015, it was published in the papers for all to see that Mr. Jerry Brooks had retired as Chief Operating Officer, had retired from every single Ansa Makal subsidiary, controlled company, affiliated company, associated company, 5 months before the general election.
They were convinced they were winning.
But the Honourable Leader of the Opposition will come here and say, oh, it's when PNM win, and he was still on the board,
Without regard to the truth.
that he became chairman of NGC, and he now associated with them, and is interlocking directorates, and is a super elite and all. Complete fabrication, Madam Speaker. And I just don't have the time or patience to, don't have the time or patience to file a privileges matter. Otherwise, I would have done so. But I can't be bothered, Madam Speaker. I can't be bothered. The public knows that what the opposition leader said was simply false and untrue.
Shameful.
Just harassing people for no reason. What Jerry Brooks ever do to all you? Harassing innocent people for no reason. Telling untruths on them. Putting falsehoods and fabrications. Yes, Terence Farrell as well. And Alison Lewis. They just don't care. They just don't care, Madam Speaker. They do not care. And as for First Citizens, in this allegation that they go happen as well, all these interlocking directorates, and they will benefit as well. I have looked at the last annual report of FCB for the year ended 30th September 2015, and I looked there on the 10 largest shareholders: FCB Holdings, National Insurance, Unit Trust, Republic Bank, National Enterprises, Tatil, Colonial Life, RBC, RBTT, Guardian. And when I looked to see the shareholding of Tatil Life Assurance, 0.47% in FCB. 0.47%.
No.
And anybody would know when you get a rights offering, they will offer you normally the same amount that you have. So the most they could get is another 0.47% if they're lucky.
Not even the
If they're lucky.
Not even the
They may even get 0.2% or 0.1%. So if you have 0.4% and you get another 0.2%. How on earth does that make you a member of an ultra elite in a supra universe created by the member for Siparia, controlling a company? You have 0.6%, but you control it in... Yes, you're right. It's in a strange place. It's a tale told by...
That's what the Prime
a rant,
Minister
a madman's rant. Using her words. Using her words. A rant in a strange land. But let me go to the one, you know, they think they could bust Mark, you know. They feel they could bust Mark.
Miss Mark.
But it's just nonsense. They thought they could bust a mark on me. So let me deal with that one. They listen to this one, Madam Speaker. The foreign yacht services have been zero rated in Trinidad and Tobago since 1995. Since 1995. So for 21 years, foreign yacht services were zero rated in Trinidad and Tobago. In other words, not eligible for VAT, Madam Speaker. But what does the member for Siparia do? In consultation with the member for Approach East, who is showing photographs of a boat that costs less than half his gratuity payment. Less than half the gratuity payment through the milk of human kindness that came from the Ministry of Finance to him in 2016. What does she say? She says, I did that to benefit myself. Now, let me read into the record. And she sat down. Some speechwriters wrote, and now he will jump up, so sit down. And the honorable member of Siparia was so confused in her speech that she actually read the thing in brackets, you know. The last man who did that was a UNC Minister of Education, Mr. Paradigm, where he went to deliver a speech. And in the speech they said, shake hands now, in brackets. They put in italics, shake hands now. And he reading the speech, he opened a school and he say, shake hands now. He read the thing. The last man who do that was a UNC Minister of Education. So the honorable member has in a speech, sit down, he go jump up, bobbing and waving now. Well, of course, I did not get up. But she still read it. Look how he bobbing and waving, getting up. It is an absurdity, Madam Speaker. But listen to this. This is what is the fact with respect to foreign yacht services. Finance Act of 1995
definition
introduced the following services as zero rated. 21 years in it in operation, under 5 years and 3 months under them. Repair of yachts and pleasure craft owned by persons who are neither citizens nor residents of Trinidad and Tobago at the time when the repairs are performed.
10 years.
They can't even do basic research.
Or read.
The zero rating of VAT for foreign yacht services by law applies only to persons who own boats who are neither citizens nor residents of Trinidad and Tobago.
That's a senior counsel.
So it's for a foreigner who's coming here to escape the hurricane season, because let me tell you, Madam Speaker, they don't even understand anything. If the member for Caroni Central should have advised them, but no, he's lost in some little world of his own. The yachty business in Chagaramas, Madam Speaker, developed over many years, because Trinidad and Tobago is below the hurricane belt. You see, the other day, Matthew was coming and it went up the road. It is typical for hurricanes to form in the mid-Atlantic. They normally form in latitude directly in parallel with Trinidad and Tobago. By the time they get within a couple 100 miles of Barbados, they start to go north. That is the normal cycle of a hurricane. So they could sometimes go through Dominica, St. Lucia, Antigua. In the particular case of Matthew, Matthew went straight in between. If you looked at the track, Madam Speaker, Matthew went in between Haiti and Jamaica, and went straight up the road, hit the Bahamas, and then hit the whole eastern coast of North America, all up to the Carolinas, and then came back down. But that is the pattern of hurricane activity in Trinidad, in the Caribbean. Madam Speaker, would you quieten down the honourable members opposite?
Member for Couva South, member for Caroni East. You all are disturbing the sitting, and I am not going to stand on my legs again to call member for Caroni East and member for Couva South.
So yes, Madam Speaker. So Trinidad and Tobago is spared the usual hurricane track. The only hurricane that ever hit Trinidad and Tobago was, apart from the UNC, was Flora. Apart from the UNC. So the yachties, they bring their boats to Trinidad during the hurricane season, Madam Speaker. And a thriving business has developed in Chagaramas over the last 20 years or so, where all sorts of boat repair services, outhaul services, painting, all sorts of artisan work, cabinetry, electrical, plumbing, mechanical repairs, etc. It has grown in the Chagaramas Peninsula over the last 20 years. And as part of the suite of incentives, fiscal incentives designed to encourage that industry, in 1995, Finance Act of 1995 zero-rated foreign yacht services. So there are now thousands of people in Chagaramas who earn their livelihood. There are all sorts of businesses that earn their income from these foreign yachts that come here. But when they put it in, the government, the parliament was very careful and made sure that no tricky daddian will be able to benefit from this, so that the exemption is only available to people who are neither citizens nor residents of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, what I find shocking, this thing went in 1995. The government changed in 95. The government came in, a new government, the UNC government came in 1995, and was in government from 95 to 2001. And in all those years, the member for Siparia was holding high office, as high as the Attorney General at one point in time. Knew very well that this exemption only applied to foreigners. And then from 2010 to 2015, administered this provision in the VAT Act, knowing it's only applied to foreigners, but want to come and bust a mark, misled by the member for Oropouche East. As I said, I have some pictures on his phone. That is the approach of the honourable members opposite, Madam Speaker. Let me deal with the budget numbers now. The honourable member for Siparia couldn't understand why, when you add up the numbers in the estimates of recurrent expenditure and you add the PSIP, you get a number that's more than 53 billion. Again, I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
Don't be shocked.
Because if you look in the estimates of recurrent expenditure, you will see that $2.6 billion for the Infrastructure Development Fund appears both in the recurrent estimates in the Ministry of Finance, which has always been since the Infrastructure Development Fund was created many, many years ago, and for the whole 5 years of the PP government. And it also appears simply for emphasis in the PSIP. So what the speechwriter was doing was double counting, because you have IDF in 2 different places. You can't add it up. And the honourable member should know that. He was Prime Minister for 5 years. Caroni Central could have told her that. Caroni East could have told her that.
Standard.
And you don't include principal repayments on debt or sinking fund contributions. This has been our practice in this country for 50 years. 50 years. Every time my predecessor came in this parliament, he never included principal repayments or sinking fund contribution or double counted the IDF. But all of a sudden, look what opposition does to you. It makes you total bay, confuffle. You get confused. 5 years as Prime Minister, you understand the budget documents, you understand that the IDF is in two places, you can't double count it. You know that you don't put principal repayments into expenditure. You know that for 5 years, but you come in opposition, you're total bay. You forget that. And you come and say, oh, look at that, I don't understand. Is the deficit 6 billion? Is it 12 billion? The Minister must explain.
When you have a 5-day weekend as PM, that's what's happening.
And you know, the Honorable Prime Minister said he would not, he didn't have time, but I have time.
Tell us.
I have time. Because one of the things that I find disgraceful is the squandermania of the last administration.
Tell Princess Town.
I have time. And I have a review of expenditure on events held at the Prime Minister's Residence and Diplomatic Center under the Honorable Member for Siparia. Just between 2014 and 2015. There was a Christmas concert. $1.5 million. What? Under the current administration, no event. Savings, $1.5 million. There was a staff Christmas dinner. This is the one that takes the cake. I didn't know they had so much staff up there. A staff Christmas dinner at the residence between 2014 and September 2015. $1,027,000.
Ask Princess Town where you was. And like
For a dinner for staff.
Wow.
$1,027,000.
Princess Town organized that.
They had a Diwali dinner. $1,323,000. A Republic Day reception. $1,261,000. A children Christmas party. $1,095,000.
Show the alternatives.
The resident staff dinner, no event held, save $1 million. They had a media reception for $616,000, no event held, save $616,000. Diwali dinner, they spend $1.3 million, we spend $500,000. And I must say, I went to that Diwali dinner and I sat right next to Satmaraj, and it was one of the best Diwali functions I've ever been to. Visit of the President of Venezuela under the Kamla Prasad Besesa regime cost $345,000. Visit of the President of Venezuela under the administration of the Honorable Member for Diego Martin West, $50,000. Same Maduro, you know, same Maduro, same people, and we get all kind of access to gas in Venezuela. We get access to sell our manufactured goods. International Women's Day. Tea. A tea for International Women's Day. $507,000.
For tea.
For tea.
And she talking about elitists.
Easter.
Elitists.
Yeah, the ultra elitists had tea for Easter. It wasn't just satisfied with Women's Day tea. They had Easter tea.
High tea.
$429,000.
Ultra elitists.
My Prime Minister had no such event. He saved $429,000.
That's like Oropuchi's fight.
Then they had a Mother's Day tea. Well, they really like tea up there, boy. Women's Day tea, $500,000. Easter tea, $400,000. Mother's Day tea, this is the one that takes the cake. A tea for Mother's Day, $706,000. A Eid dinner, $816,000.
Princess Town was in charge.
Look,
Yeah, I think so.
the total in 1 year between October 2014 and September 2015, under the leadership of the former Prime Minister, the member for Siparia, total expenditure on events at the residence and diplomatic center, $12,211,000. Under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, the Honorable Member for Diego Martin West, $2,620,000.
Whoa. You saved 10
I've
million.
saved $10 million. Let's look at staff. Look at staff. 12 local staff. 29 foreign staff. Monthly salary $452,000.
And she wasn't living there.
No, you're right.
She wasn't living there.
The others were living there. Under the current administration, 9 local staff, 1 foreign staff, A total of 10 staff members compared to 41 under the member for Siparia. Salaries under the member for Siparia, $452,000 a month. Under the member for Diga Martin West, $111,000 a month. Saving over $300,000 a month, almost $4 million a year.
Ultra elitist.
That is ultra elitist.
Ultra elitist.
Staff accommodation at the Cascadia Hotel, the ultra elitist, $186,000 per month.
What?
Yes.
Staff
Accommodation
at hotel?
for staff at the Cascadia Hotel,
But she wasn't living
$186,000 a month.
Which hotel it is?
Cascadia.
But she wasn't living there.
And under the present Prime Minister, $4,500 a month. You hear thing? Look, I don't want to read this anymore. I'm getting sick. I ain't reading nothing more. Madam Speaker, let me just deal with some other issues. We heard today an allegation, well, I've debunked this allegation about yacht services. Utter foolishness. We heard throughout the speech from members opposite, well, some say cut expenditure, some say increase expenditure. They didn't know. They were all singing from a different page in the hymn book. Madam Speaker, I just want to see. I have heard all sorts of old talk about the price of oil that the budget is based on. All kind of old talk. Madam Speaker, we in the Ministry of Finance, this Ministry of Finance, not the one before we decide what the price of oil will be in order to work out the estimates of revenue, we consult with the IMF, we consult with the World Bank, we consult with the United States Energy Information Administration, we consult with the International Energy Agency, we consult locally with all the technocrats in the Ministry of Energy, we consult with the oil companies, the oil majors, and it is based on all of those consultations, all of the forecasts, and all of the events that are affecting the price of oil at this point in time, that we have decided to base our budget on an oil price of $48, Madam Speaker. And this is not by VAPs, because we know we are not unlearned on this side. So we are aware of the factors that affect the price of oil. Currently, at this point in time, the world oil production is about 92 million barrels of oil per day, and the world oil demand is 90 million barrels a day. So there's a 2 million surplus, daily surplus in terms of oil production over demand. And that is what has caused this catastrophic collapse in the price of oil. But in addition to the excess of supply over demand, there are other things that come into play in terms of the oil price. The strength of the United States dollar, for example, Madam Speaker, because oil is priced in US dollars. So if the value of the US currency strengthens, the price of oil goes down. If you have a fire in Canada, as happened recently, and you have an outage in supply, the price of oil goes up. If you have civil unrest or you have rebellion or war, as happened in Nigeria with Boko Haram, the price of oil goes up. If the Saudi Arabian oil minister speaks, depending on what he says, the price of oil goes up or down. You would have heard, I'll come into that, you would have heard the Saudi Arabian oil minister say recently that OPEC will agree to a production cut that could be as much as 1 million barrels of oil per day. So they'll cut their production from 33.5 million barrels, this is the OPEC group, to 32.5, and immediately the price of oil went from $44 to $49. And then Vladimir Putin, and let me just give you some idea of production. The United States produces 12 million barrels of oil per day. OPEC produces 11. Saudi Arabia, produces 11 million barrels of oil per day. Russia produces 10 million barrels of oil per day. Iraq and Iran together, 7 million barrels of oil per day. So Saudi Arabia, which is the second largest producer of oil in the world, the minister said we're going to cut production. Oil jumped $5 in 2 days. And then Vladimir Putin says, well, we're following them. Oil jumped $3. So it jumps from 44 to 52 in 4 days. just because two powerful men in the world who deal with the price of oil spoke. So we have been looking at this. Yes, I know. We have been looking at this cycle, and we understand what we are doing. And I'm happy to report that the price of oil today, the budget was read on the 30th of September. The price of oil today is $50.27. And that's good enough for me. And before I conclude, Madam Speaker, yes, those fellas, they don't know what they're talking about. And they are beneficiaries of state largesse. I am advised that some of these people who have worked for the Honourable Member for Caroni Central at the defense so vociferously and zealously, this gentleman, this distinguished university lecturer, Roger Hossain, I am advised that he was the very fortunate beneficiary of a contract to do a paper entitled Macroeconomic Aspects of the Labour Market in Trinidad and Tobago, for which he was paid the princely sum of $2.25 million under the UNC. $2.25 million. That is in addition to the almost $300,000 that has been discovered so far in the Ministry of Planning. And they were just feeding them, Madam Speaker, they were feeding them. No wonder, because the gravy train stopped, because they can't put the snout in the trough anymore. That is it. They're coming out and talking. No wonder if you're getting millions and millions of dollars and all of a sudden it stopped. You must come out and talk. But let's move on. The member for Chaguanas West made an allegation about the chairman of WASA. And he alleged that the chairman of WASA had jumped in and said that the chairman of WASA had interfered with a payment and had organized an ex gratia payment to some contractor involved in the wastewater project in San Fernando.
And he write the IDB.
And he write the IDB. Madam Speaker, I have in my possession a report which I will circulate, and this is Multi-Phase Wastewater Rehabilitation Program, San Fernando Wastewater Project, 25th July 2016, done by an IDB appointed engineer into that project, making recommendations for an ex gratia payment on that project.
What?
So the recommendation came from the consultant hired by the Inter-American Development Bank.
IDB.
But you know what is worse? Not only is it is just horrible the way all the tarnish people reputation inside of here. So the Inter-American Development Bank, what had happened? The contractor issued a notice of termination because the contractor had underpriced the project, and the contractor decided to pull out, and the IDB, becoming concerned because it's a very important project, facilitated the engagement of a specialist engineer, very highly qualified engineer, hired by the IDB to look at the project and make recommendations, and the engineer recommended an ex gratia payment. And they recommended a payment of $19 million US. And I will circulate documents to prove that as well. So the IDB recommended that WASA pay the contractor an ex gratia payment to get them to return to complete the project of $19 million US. And the words used by the IDB is that $19 million US is fair market value in terms of the underpricing of the contract. And you know, WASA, under this administration, under our chairman, refused to pay $19 million and said they will pay no more than $9 million US. And I have in my possession an email from the IDB quarreling with WASA, saying you're being too aggressive. The fair market value of this payment is $19 million US. Why do you want to pay the man only $9 million US? Those are the facts, Madam Speaker. Those are the facts. I will put this into the record. But they would come here and buffmark and say the PNM appointed chairman of WASA is corrupt, and how he interfered and he unilaterally decided to give these people $9 million US, when in fact it was the IDB who recommended that and said pay the man $19 million, and we decided to pay him $9 million, Madam Speaker. Every mark the boss in this house was not true, Madam Speaker. Yes, not true.
And they say it's a plum.
Yes, just not true. Just not true. How many more minutes do I have, Madam Speaker? One more minute? So, Madam Speaker, to recap, It has been a challenging year.
Absolutely.
But I have the 10 as well. Well, then I'm very glad to hear that. But I'll still continue to recap. It has been a very challenging year. We have managed to curtail expenditure by $11 billion.
Country didn't fall down. Country still afloat and stable.
Do I have to ask for the 10 minutes? Oh, okay. And you know what I find shocking too is not just the speechwriter for the honourable member for Superior that's illiterate and innumerate and has some kind of intellectual incapacity. It's all of them. Because I heard the speechwriter for the member for Tabakit made him get up and say how we spend $61 billion in fiscal 2016. I keep hearing this. The honourable leader of the opposition say, oh, they spend 61 billion. The honourable member for Tabakit, oh, they spend 61 billion. And when you look in the documents, the fiscal outturn is there.
Honourable Member for Diego Martin notice, your original 45 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam. Yes, Madam Speaker, when you look in the budget documents, it's there in black and white. A primary school child could understand the numbers. The expenditure for fiscal 2016 was $52.2 billion.
Full stop.
I said it in the budget speech, it in the documents. Why are the honourable members opposite saying how we spend 61 billion and we have to explain?
And they bring CSO for the first time since 2013.
And yes, Madam Speaker, when I heard that astonishing false allegation from the member for Caroni Central that when he left office, all the CSO statistics were up to date. I mean, this is just incredible. Because, Madam Speaker, even in the last budget, when we presented the data available on the labor force, go and read it. You will see the last labor force bulletin that was published under the People's Partnership Government was for March 2015, 6 months out of date. But yet I have to hear the honourable member for Caroni Central who feels that because he was in charge of the CSO, he has to mislead.
And you had the courage to read this.
Madam, hear this nonsense. Hear this nonsense. And they got the GDP all wrong. And you know, Madam Speaker, I could have operated like them, you know.
And hid the GDP.
I could have get somebody in the CSO to go and manipulate the figures, you know. I could have do that.
That's what they did.
That's why people are under investigation now for doing that. But no, when I discovered that under the People's Partnership they were inflating the GDP.
That's right.
Because they were quoting a GDP of 175 billion when it was only 167 billion.
Wow.
To hide the debt to GDP.
I just had a discussion. I had a discussion with the technocrats. I said, explain this to me. They said the first thing was an estimate, and now they have the actual figures, and they have to correct the GDP. I could have do like them. I could have get somebody to go and interfere with the thing and leave it, and leave it at 175 billion. But we don't operate so.
Truth.
We don't operate so. That is why I reviewed this review of the economy. I didn't change anything inside of here, Madam Speaker. Facts. That's how we operate on this side. So our GDP has been recalibrated. It has been reduced based on a new calculation. All right, we gotta live with that. So that instead of the GDP being 155 billion or 160 billion, which is what it was said to be in 2015, we take it down to 145. Okay, I go along with it. And what that did, because the level of debt has not changed, and you see, that's why I say your speechwriters are illiterate, enumerate, and have a mental incapacity. Because the quantum of debt remains the same, but the GDP has been recalibrated downwards. The debt to GDP ratio must go up.
Obviously.
Somebody doing SCA, doing the national test could figure that out. If you have two numbers,
So they misled
one on top the other, and one below is reduced, then the ratio goes up, goes up.
So the light is called
Simple mathematics that a primary school child could understand. And let me deal with some other allegations, Madam Speaker. Let me deal with one of the things that, one of the things that bothered me, Madam Speaker, was the capacity of honourable members opposite to say things that are just not true. The member for St. Augustine and the member for Oropouche East wanted to know why the lights at the Ramlila Festival in Pier Road were turned off. Big set of noise about we don't like them and we don't like people who engage in Ramlila, and of course the usual undertone, Madam Speaker, in these allegations. What are the facts? What are the facts? The Pier Road Festival Committee made a request for the lights at the Ramlila Festival. Yeah. The Pier Road Festival Committee made a request for the lights at the Ramlila Festival to be turned off at 11 p.m. instead of the usual 9 p.m. because these lights are on a timer, Madam Speaker. Because you have all these recreation grounds where you have these lights which are just burning electricity, which have to be paid for by taxpayers. So if the grounds are not being used, there's a timer that automatically turns off the lights. So the festival committee asked TNTech, could you adjust the timer so that the lights come off at 11 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. TNTech informed the festival committee that they could accommodate them up to 10:30 p.m. So that normally the lights would come off at 9 p.m. TNTech told them that they would adjust the lights so they would be turned off at 10:30 p.m. And TNTech also gave an undertaking that they would present themselves on site. And if for some reason the festival went beyond 10:30 p.m., they would keep the lights on. I can inform this Honourable House now that I am advised that on both days the festival finished at 9:30 p.m. What? You hear that, Madam Speaker? I am advised that on both days the festival finished at 9:30 p.m. Yeah, you could say that if you want.
You wish to make an interruption?
Yeah, well, you go and tell TNTech they're not telling the truth, no? No problem. Now, another issue, Madam Speaker. Another issue, Madam Speaker, that arose. They keep carrying on about this property tax. Getting on and getting on about it. As if they didn't debate the property tax legislation when it came to Parliament in 2009, 2010. Yes, they keep carrying on. Yeah, I know. I want to deal with this issue about exemptions for indigent, for persons on fixed incomes. With respect, and I'm reading from the Property Tax Act. And this is why I wonder, do you all read?
Research to read,
Section 23. The board, which will be the Board of Inland Revenue, may, upon the application of the owner of land, authorize the deferral of the payment of the assessed tax. An application shall be made in writing in the prescribed form, accompanied by evidence that the applicant is in receipt of a public assistance grant, a disability grant, a senior citizens grant, a Trinidad and Tobago conditional cash card from the state, does not receive an annual income exceeding the maximum amount specified in Section 3 of the Senior Citizens Grant. It's there in black and white. It's in the Act. So pensioners will not have to pay property tax. Can't you read? And this is what we have to put up with, Madam Speaker. This is what we have to put up with. It's there in black and white. And they're asking, oh gosh, the people are going to lose their home. They're going all over the country telling all these elderly people, these pensioners, P&M coming to take your house. And the law says that if you are a recipient of the Senior Citizens Grant or your income does not exceed the income for people, recipients of the grant, you don't have to pay property tax. So, Madam Speaker, in this last 5 days, all I've heard from members opposite is rhetoric. All I've heard is the reasons why they lost the 2015 election. Because they extol all the virtues and all the things they did and all the box drain they build and all them things that they do. And they said that throughout the general election of 2015. Every night you're hearing from Tabakit, he built 15,000 box drain. He patched 29,000 pothole. He built 100 school, 10,000 bridge. That's all we heard from them in 2015. And yet, I remember a line from Barack Obama when he was contesting his first presidential election. He said they say all kind of thing about him. He not born in the United States. He's a Muslim. He don't believe in God. All kind of thing. And Barack Obama said, and the population didn't buy it. They elected me president of the United States. Well, the population didn't buy your rhetoric. They elected the PNM as the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I beg to move.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2017 be now read a second time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Now, members, before I call
a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2017.
Honorable members, before I call again on the Minister of Finance, and before the House goes into the Standing Committee, I wish to take an opportunity to address the House on the matter which I brought to your attention yesterday. Members may recall that on the adjournment of yesterday's sitting of this House, I directed the Clerk of the House to investigate the taking and subsequent posting on social media of a photograph of a member of this House in contravention of the rules of this House and Bulletin Number 1 of the first session of this 11th Parliament, which was issued and circulated on November 27, 2015. Pursuant to my directions, an investigation was conducted, and based upon the findings, I am satisfied of the following. 1. At around 6:30 p.m. on Monday, October 10, 2016, a photograph was taken of a member of this Honorable House by another member opposite. 2. By 6:45 p.m., that photograph had been converted into a derogatory meme and was posted on social media. 3. The photograph was taken without the knowledge or permission of the member captured. And 4. The member of Parliament who took the photograph can be clearly identified. The footage that was shown to me and which led to the identification of the offending member can be viewed by any member through the office of the Marshal of the Parliament, and I so invite you all to view. Honorable members, it cannot be right for members to willingly and knowingly engage in acts which seek to bring this House into public disrepute, odium, and ridicule. Members must exercise good sense in how they conduct themselves in the chamber and must be cognizant of how their conduct may be injurious to other members of this honorable place. Furthermore, any member, including the offending member, must be comfortable in this House to rest his eyes or her eyes, to confer with his or her colleagues, or to refresh himself or herself without derision from his colleagues, whether directly or via indirect means. Immature and discourteous actions, such as occurred in the instant circumstance, do not support the dignity on which this chamber is founded, or the esteem in which this institution is and should be held. To say that the chair is disappointed over the conduct of the member who took and distributed this photograph is a mild understatement. As Speaker of the House, it is my duty, my responsibility, my obligation to maintain respect to this august chamber, to protect the dignity of this honorable House, and to safeguard all members from this type of intrusion. The chamber is a working environment, and I acknowledge the utility of electronic devices to assist members with their work as parliamentarians. However, I must denounce the use of these devices for the sole purpose of denigrating another member and bringing the Parliament into disgrace and disrepute, while at the same time incurring a breach of the rules of this House. With the advent of the use of electronic devices and social media, both inside and outside the chamber, the citizens of this country, particularly its young persons, must be able to turn to its leaders for examples of acceptable practice. Of course, not every matter in relation to the use of devices can be regulated. However, the general standard of conduct expected of someone who holds the office of Member of Parliament, particularly those who are seasoned and experienced, should be guided by decorum, civility, maturity, and courtesy. This expectation naturally extends to the use of electronic devices. Since this incident, similarly derogatory memes created during this budget debate have come to my attention. It appears that it is now an unfortunate practice that some members occupy themselves with, during this important parliamentary time, with this sort of immature behavior rather than the serious business of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If a member of this House can intentionally breach the rules of order, how then can we as parliamentarians, we who make laws, tell the citizens to obey the laws that we make here or to take public affairs seriously? I wish to further advise members that it is my intention to convene a meeting with the offending member, his chief whip, and the leader of the House at the earliest opportunity. I also propose to amend the procedural bulletin on the use of electronic devices so that it will be very clear to all members the procedure and consequences which will be triggered by further breaches after this ruling. I thank you. Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 81, subsection 8, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2017 be referred to the Standing Finance Committee for the consideration of the bill together with the estimates.
Honorable members, this House shall now go into Standing Finance Committee to consider the bill and the estimates. Honorable members, in accordance with Standing Order 81, 2, and 8, the estimates containing the details of the financial requirements, along with the appropriation bill, have been referred to this committee for consideration. The documents before the committee therefore include the draft estimates, details of estimates of recurrent expenditure, which identifies 1. The head of expenditure, 2, the chart of accounts and classification of expenditure sub-items under personal expenditure, goods and services, and minor equipment purchases subheads. 3, the summary of the total allocation to each head of expenditure. And 4, the sub-item details relevant to each head of expenditure for the current fiscal year and the 2 fiscal years immediately preceding. The draft estimates of revenue and expenditure of the statutory boards and similar bodies and the Tobago House of Assembly, which identifies as follows. 1, the statutory board or body for each head of expenditure. 2, the abstract of estimated revenue and expenditure for the year ending 30th of September 2017. 3, the abstract showing the government subvention for 2015 actual expenditure, 2016 estimates, 2016 revised estimates, 2017 estimates, and the increase or decrease of the 2017 estimates over or under the 2016 revised estimates. 4, the chart of accounts for income and expenditure. 5, the classification of expenditure sub-items under the personal expenditure, goods and services, and minor equipment purchases subheads. 6, the sub-item details relevant to each statutory body or board for the current fiscal year and the 2 fiscal years immediately preceding. The draft estimates of development program, which includes 1, the summary of estimates of the development program for the financial year 2017 for Part A, the Consolidated Fund. 2, the summary of the total allocation to each head of expenditure for subhead 09, Development Program Consolidated Fund. 3, the sub-item, project group, and project description details relevant to each head of expenditure for the current fiscal year and the 2 fiscal years immediately preceding. 4, the summary of estimates of Part B, the Infrastructure Development Fund for the financial year 2017. 5, the summary of the total allocation to each head of expenditure for head 701, the Infrastructure Development Fund. 6, the sub-item, project group, and project description details relevant to each head of expenditure for the current fiscal year and the 2 fiscal years immediately preceding. The Appropriation Financial Year 2017 Bill 2016. The bill provides for the service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2017. The bill seeks to authorize a sum of $45,096,877,023 from the Consolidated Fund. The schedule details for the sum to be approved for each head of expenditure. In accordance with Standing Order 85-1, the consideration of the clauses of the bill will be postponed until after the consideration of the schedule, which lists the heads of expenditure to be approved. The heads will be considered in the order submitted by the Leader of the Opposition. The proposed work schedule. Honorable members, there are 40 heads of expenditure to be considered over a 5-day period. Therefore, I propose that the committee meet each day from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. or for so long thereafter to consider a minimum of 8 heads of expenditure, save and except for October 13, 2016, when the committee will commence at 1:30 p.m. Consideration of the Tobago House of Assembly. Honorable members, I seek the committee's cooperation to obtain agreement on the time for the examination of the Tobago House of Assembly on day 5, and day 5 was selected by the Leader of Opposition. so that the members of the Tobago House of Assembly can make arrangements to travel to Trinidad. May I suggest that, given the orders submitted by the Leader of the Opposition, that the Tobago House of Assembly be examined on or around 10 a.m. on day 5.
Madam, if I may, Madam, there are two issues I'd like to bring to your attention.
Would you,
If I-
therefore, would it be inconvenient to consider it under other business, or does it affect
It affects
the work
it
program?
affects the work program.
Okay.
One is the time. By agreement, we are suggesting 10:30 rather than 10.
So we sit from 10:30 to 8:30.
Yes.
But I want members to understand, 8:30 or for so long thereafter,
Yes.
so that we achieve a minimum of 8.
Yeah. We agree. Yeah. The other issue, if I may raise it now, is I had indicated to my
The whip?
colleague, the whip, that on Tuesday we're supposed to do tourism, but we'd like tourism shifted to another day, please.
Is there agreement on that?
Yeah.
It
Would
could
you
be
be in a position
either-
to say, because switching it may mean an exchange?
Yes.
And therefore, the technocrats from the various
Yes.
ministries and the line minister will need to know.
May I indicate that we can either shift to Monday or Wednesday? But it would also mean shifting one of the
And that's-
heads.
yes.
So may I ask that
We
I be
report on
allowed
that tomorrow?
Tomorrow to report on that?
Yes?
Madam Chair, we can have a discussion and facilitate the shifting tomorrow.
Yes. Okay, thank you. That is noted. Okay, so the understanding is that, save and except for tomorrow, we start at 10:30 on every day. Okay, 1:30 tomorrow. As far as speaking time, honorable members, in accordance with Standing Order 45-1, the speaking time in Standing Finance Committee shall not exceed 5 minutes on each intervention. Each minister will be invited to make a brief 5-minute opening statement on the ministry or the department's priority areas for the upcoming year. The procedure for each head shall be as follows. 1, the head and the amount to be appropriated will be announced by me as chairman. 2, the minister will then be invited to make a brief opening statement. 3, the chairman will then propose the question that the sum proposed stand part of the schedule. 4, each head of expenditure, I will call the subhead followed by the item. I shall not call the sub-items. Discussions can ensue on the item called or the relevant sub-item and clarification sought. Once the committee moves to another subhead, questions from a previous subhead will not be entertained. 5, the chairman will repeat the procedure for the development program. 6, once this is concluded, the chairman will then put the question that the sums stand part of the schedule. 7, the procedure will be repeated for each head of expenditure. And while it might have been a little lengthy, so that hopefully it will help us expedite the flow over the next 5 days. Okay, so that if there is no other business, I therefore will say, honorable members, the meeting of the Standing Finance Committee is suspended and will resume on Thursday, October 13, 2016 at 1:30 p.m.
follow. The Parliament of